Hello and welcome to the FinTech Finance Virtual Arena. And today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a company called SupplyME, which really seemed to be disrupting the trade finance, blockchain, and the FinTech industry in general. So joining me today is Alessandro Zamboni. Alessandro, how are you doing today?
Fine, thanks.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, Alessandro, to kick things off and to give our audience a bit of an idea who haven't heard of SupplyME before, can you give us a bit of introduction to yourself and why you created SupplyME, please?
Yes, I'm the founder of SupplyME. I founded the initiative in 2015. My background is I worked in several years, near 20 years in financial services. I'm an expert of regulation, risk management processes and methodologies. And so we decided in 2015 to start this disruptive, innovative initiative that is focused on inventories. We saw in the past several initiatives focused on trade receivables in the fintech, space, but we decided, gaining traction from our background, to focus on a new area, a new room of opportunities that is basically the inventory. I come from Milan, and I also be a co-founder of the main important fintech association in Italy. And my background also, I work in the marketing in L'Oreal. So I try to use my skills in order to develop this global initiative that the name is SupplyME.
Amazing. Now, with that in mind, you've touched on a few points that I think are so critical to what SupplyME does. Can you give us a bit more of an introduction to what SupplyME does and why it's going to be so critical going forward?
Indeed. Before starting the initiative, we studied the addressable market. And we saw in Europe, and now the initiative is global, but in Europe, we saw in 2015, nearly 3,000 of banks, fintech, for a market of 80 billion of euros, and only two players for a market of 400 billion of euros. That is the inventory facilities market. And so we decided to work on this extreme and huge addressable market, and we decided to basically create a new product. You know that in innovation, we can innovate through technology, or we can innovate through a new service model or new product. We decide to combine these two pillars, but we are focused. We can say that we created a new product, that is the inventory monetization. The key point for a customer, and also for our shareholders, is that the monetization is not financing. It's a very important point also in the storytelling for our clients that know that the market has asset-based lenders, has trade receivables platforms, whatever banks that through commercial lines, but no one now is promoting a monetization service that basically allow a company to sell the inventory to the platform, to monetize via cash the stock, and not having any debt, any obligation of refund the credit. And this is a very important point, because obviously we don't study the initiative because we projected the COVID situation, our unfortunately environment situation. But after COVID, our service and now during the COVID period has an increase of requests, because you know that the supply chain, the various companies need to monetize to get cash from their stock, and also has to prepare the new normal phase, managing differently the refurbishment of the inventories. So briefly, there are two takeaway points. Firstly, is not financing. Secondly, SupplyME is focused on an untapped market. So we are focused to a huge untapped market where banks, funds now are not operating.
Interesting. Now, with that in mind, you have brought it up slightly there. There's been so much disruption to supply chains because of the pandemic. Also, here in the UK, we've had Brexit. Going forward, how critical will it be for businesses of any industry to get a clearer view of its inventory?
Before COVID and also after COVID, we saw this kind of situation. Basically, big large corporates need to monetize stock because banks, the credit financial industry is going to reducing the credit exposure. There are several more constraints relating to the credit lines, also the credit approach that the bank can manage vis-a-vis corporates or also small medium enterprises. So it's not only a theme of credit crunch, but also new rules that the regulators, you know that I'm an expert of regulation, are asking, and are going to ask to banks. And accordingly, a CFO, visionary CFO of a corporate, has to understand that they need to reshape their funding strategy for a company and to try to find new alternative facilities, not only related to the trade receivables, but only for the key part of their working capital, that is the stock. And SupplyME basically is promoting and also is dialoguing with this kind of corporates that are structured corporates, and they know very well the opportunity to use an alternative facility that in addition is not a financing facility.
I think that's going to be critical. I'm going to bring it up later on in the conversation, how it isn't just a financing company. Now, I want to, for our audience, kind of get behind the scenes of SupplyME and hear what technology do you use to be able to operate this really quite groundbreaking model?
Great. Yes, as I'm saying, creating a new product that is made of legals, clauses, accounting mechanisms, because there are a powerful benefit for a company to manage a true sale of inventory, so to recognize the inventory from their balance sheet. But the technology is very important because we are managing this kind of transaction through a digital system that is a legal binding enforceability legal system, digital system. More in detail, we create a digital certificate of a stock of the inventory that is on the basis of the purchase of the inventory between the company and the platform. And this kind of digital certificates has a legal value. So in case of legal enforceability of the contract, the lawyers, the investors can use these digital certificates as a formal official proof of the ownership of inventory in the perspective of the platform, and so to reduce the risk. The second point very important, is the purpose to use the blockchain. We are not a fancy startup that want to develop distributed ledger technology in order to pump the initiative. But we know very well that one of the key points that unfortunately also recently we saw the crash of Greensill is an example, is the trust of the investors on the database or the information behind the transactions. And also the risk that these transactions, the transparency, could be tampered by a conflict of interest or whatever problem. So for us, the blockchain stake, the layer of the blockchain technology, is important to create a sort of trusted data environment in favor of our investors, because investors are putting funds in order to allow the platform to purchase the inventories from the current companies, and we need to give back transparency and to avoid any risk that the data could be tampered or could be manipulated by the platform, by third parties. And this is the very important rule in order to use, I think in a clever way, the blockchain technology for our business.
Yeah, that when I was doing my research, I was really impressed that you're actually utilizing a technology that there is a lot of sensationalization around. I like your phrase there. You don't want to just pamper the hype effectively. So, can you give me a snapshot into how you think other companies or other industries might look to blockchain and realize that this is the way forward, and why haven't the banks grasped this the way that you guys have?
Yes, I think that blockchain basically is a technology, and I'm not talking about the crypto sectors. That is another world, and we can spend several hours to talk about the pros and cons to the crypto. But talking about the technology, the distributed ledger technology basically allow to increase the trust between parties, and obviously is not the DLT or the blockchain can solve all the issues, because also DLT has an administrator, so the administrator could manage the data. But we think that in specific business model where the transparency, the conflict of interest to manage data is higher, is important to use technology in order to reduce this gap, this trust gap. And so the DLT or blockchain, public blockchain, can use in the business model where this additional stake of technology can create an higher value to the service, to the product. The bank and the funders, you know that SupplyME is working alongside a captive bank, a partner that basically want to fund the platform using a traditional banking system. Again, it's important to give to the funders the trust, and to ensure that all data are valuable also for regulatory points, because regulators now are worried about how a bank can look through the investments and understand what are going to invest. And so all the technology, blockchain in particular, that could open the transparency is also a good upside, a good value for the regulator, to also allow a bank maybe to use or to invest in a new product, a new service model.
Amazing. Now, with that in mind, one thing I really like to do in the virtual arenas, especially when we're doing a profile piece, is kind of look at the value given and look at real use cases and how you can improve the lives of people. Now, this is going to be an interesting one, because obviously you play such an important role in the whole chain. So, I mean, to kick things off then, let's start at the base. What can SupplyME do for businesses in particular, and what are you hoping to be able to help them with going forward?
I think that started by 2019, SupplyME is dialoguing, is working with companies now in several geographies. So SupplyME is working in UK, in MENA region, in Italy, nearly in Singapore. We are purchasing, we are announcing the acquisition of a fintech in Singapore, and also in US with our partner Anthony Brown. And we are educating firstly the market about this new facility. Is a key point, because the innovation, you know, firstly, the first phase is to educate the novel model, this new model. And now we used last year in particular to educate our two main shareholders. One are our business owners, the clients. The second one are our investors, because SupplyME is basically is fostering two innovation. In the perspective of the company, I was saying the monetization of a stock of inventory. In the perspective of a funder, is a new asset class, because the underlying is not trade receivables, supply chain financing, reverse factoring, as we know. And so the first key point is that we are educating, because we prefer to educate our shareholders in order to commit them to use also in a long-term period the service, and not, I give you an example, to sell to the investors the existence of a credit insurance policy in order to achieve investments, because we are selling the credit insurance rating and not the underlying. We prefer to sell our underlying, that are inventories, and then have a long-term stable relationship with our investors. This is a key point. So the education, also the education of our CFO, the CFO of the client companies, that is new facilities. Is not sense to compare our facility to our cost of credit, for instance, because they have not any obligation to reimburse the credit line. Just a quick example. So the education, I think that is the key message, the key words in order to say what we are doing, what we did in the first phase. And now we are delivering.
Brilliant. And because you are part of that chain, and you have touched on it, but I want to explore it further, because I think this is going to have industry-wide implications across many different verticals, is that reduction of risk that you said. You brought up Greensill, obviously, and the fact that in supply chains and global and trade finance now, things are moving far quicker, payments especially. You want to keep track of that. So what can SupplyME do for trade finance and reducing risk overall?
Our facility can reduce the risk because the underlying is a ownership of the platform. The difference between land with underlying and inventory and purchase and inventory is basically the legal enforceability in case of default of the company. If you are a lender, you have to manage a lengthy process to achieve the funds back. If you are owner of inventory, maybe you can use in 1 week, you can take back the inventory and resell the inventory to third party. This is an example to use a non-credit approach. Also in the trade finance is also the reason because we decided to acquire a company in Singapore. The name is Trade Flow Capital, that basically is a fintech focused on the trade finance space through a non-credit approach. The difference is, as you correctly are saying, is that we are reducing the residual risk, the risk for investors, compared to a traditional borrowing line or credit line.
Amazing. And I think that's going to be so critical because it just removes that complexity for everyone in the chain. Now, I've got to ask then, you've already told me a couple of exciting new movements that's happening at SupplyME, for instance, purchasing that company over in Singapore, moving out into all these different geographies. When you're part of this supply chain across the world, what's next for SupplyME?
I think that SupplyME now is seeing the particular this year. We are seeing the opportunity to be the leading platform that can foster the inventory monetization if an inventory is on the premises of a company and if an inventory is in transit. We are basically an opportunity for all companies in the world to say, okay, I have a stock in my premises, I can use SupplyME for monetize. I have to sell the inventories to a buyer in US, in other part of the world, I can use SupplyME and also create a value across my values, my supply chain. And so SupplyME is basically positioning to be the leading platform, a global platform for the end-to-end facility when a company wants to monetize the inventories in the end-to-end value chain.
Incredible. And really, I guess probably one of the most important questions is, what's this going to mean for investment banking in the future? Having this increased visibility, this increased amount of data, this is only going to sharpen the ability for trade financiers to actually make correct actions and correct plays going forward. Am I correct?
It's correct, because one of the mission of the platform, the fintech, and to enhance data quality, enhance new data streams for the shareholders, for the community, is an important mission. Each fintech, I think, that has to create new data streams in order to create or give the opportunity for shareholders to give value, to create new product, to invest with more transparency, to give to the client more transparency. And for sure, SupplyME is creating a new data stream that is that basically are information about the inventories. All the investment bank, all the banks are focused to the cash-based model, so are keen to understand the balance sheet or other financial information for a company. But the key point to understand the health of the company is the sell-in and sell-out of each inventories. This is the key point. And we are creating also database, a data stream for new potential investors, new potential players in the market.
I think to me that is so critical. It's opening up a whole nother set of value when a lot of businesses are finding times can be quite tough, especially when moving all this inventory. To be able to have that is so critical. So Alessandro, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I hope you've had a good time, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about SupplyME in the future.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. And to all our viewers, you can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com, and of course, YouTube and LinkedIn, where I'll see you in the comments. So see you then, and goodbye.